Year 10 and 11, welcome to your analysis of Checking Out Me History by John Agard in preparation for your AQA English Literature Poetry exam. The poet. John Agard was born in British Guiana in the Caribbean in 1949. He moved to the UK in the late 1970s and is well known for powerful and fun performances of his work. He uses non-standard phonetic spelling, that's when we write words as they sound, to represent his own accent, and writes about what it is like being black, to challenge racist attitudes, especially those which are unthinking. As you can see there in red, one of our key words is non-standard phonetic spelling, and we shall address that throughout when we analyse language. The poem. It's very hard to fit this poem onto one slide, so I've set it out like that just so I can get the reading done. Can I apologise in advance for my pronunciation here, as there's some foreign words, and if I pronounce them wrong, as I say, I apologise. So the poem. Dem tell me, what dem want to tell me. Bandage up me eye with me own history. Blind me to me own identity. Dem tell me about 1066 and all that. Dem tell me about Dick Whittington and he cat. But Toussaint l'Ouverture, no dem never tell me about that. Toussaint a slave with vision, lick back, Napoleon, battalion, and first Black Republic born, Toussaint de Thorn to the French. Toussaint de beacon of the Haitian Revolution, dem tell me about the man who discovered the balloon, and the cow who jumped over the moon. Dem tell me about the dish, ran away with the spoon, but dem tell me about Nanny de Maroon. Nanny, seafar woman of mountain dream, fire woman, struggle, hopeful stream to freedom river. Dem tell me about Lord Nelson and Waterloo, but dem never tell me about Shakadi Great Zulu. Dem tell me about Columbus and 1492. Dem tell me about Florence Nightingale and she lamp, and how Robin Hood used to camp. Dem tell me about Old King Cole was a merry old soul, but dem never tell me about Mary C. Cole. From Jamaica, she travelled far to the Crimean War. She volunteered to go, and even when the British said no, he's still brave, the Russian snow, a healing star among the wounded, a yellow sunrise to the dying. Dem tell me, what dem want to tell me, but now I checking out my own history, I carving out me identity. Once again, I apologise for my pronunciation there, but as long as you get, the general gist of what he's saying, it's very hard to read. All right. So what is the poem about? This poem draws on Agard's experience to make us look at the way history is taught and at how we conceive our identity as we learn about cultural traditions and narratives. It becomes clear that Agard had to follow a history curriculum biased towards whites, especially British whites, so that he learned about mythical nursery rhyme characters instead of living black people from the past. Agard challenges this view of history and cites some major black figures to balance the bias and create a basis for his own identity. Don't forget, if you need to stop the video to make any notes, to do so, yeah? The structure of the poem. Checking Out Me History alternates between two structures marked by two different fonts. The first uses the repeated phrase dem tell me to indicate the white version of history, mostly written in rhyming couplets, triplets or quatrains. The rhyming couplets could represent the white people and the black people, and Agard there outlines the difference between the two and the fact that he is challenging racist attitudes. I did say that at the beginning, and that Agard uses a lot of his poetry to do that. And this rhyming couplet emphasises the difference between the two races. Interspersed are the stories of three black historical figures, Toussaint l'Ouverture, Nanny de Maroon and Mary C. Cole, told using abbreviated syntax with words missed out, shorter lines and an irregular rhyme scheme. The reason he does this is because he's showing us that these famous black figures in history have been missed out in his teaching of history, and rather he's been taught what he thinks is nonsensical things like British nursery rhymes. So what he's showing us there is that it is an injustice to miss out these famous black historical figures. Agard uses enjambment all the way throughout the poem. The poem never stops, it never ends, and what that does is it builds up Agard's frustration about the way he was taught history and the overall treatment of black people. So because the poem doesn't stop, you've got this anger building up and building up and building up all the way throughout. And also the use of this enjambment and the idea that it never stops, the poem never stops and his ideas never stop and his anger never stops, subtly suggests that racist ideas will continue, even subconsciously. So, for instance, he is using the history curriculum as an example. The fact that he thinks a lot of people have been taught about white people and how actually that's a little bit racist because it's missing out what black people have achieved. Obviously, as you can see just by looking at the poem, he uses irregular stanzas. And irregular stanzas allows the lessons that he feels are important to stand out. And again, through irregular stanzas, he highlights the injustice of what he has been taught about his own culture and about his history. Sound is important in all of Agard's poems. The way he speaks and obviously the way he writes, so that when we read it out, it sounds like his accent. So Agard uses variations in spelling to suggest Caribbean dialect, especially replacing the with D. This stresses the importance of carving out his own identity. So for instance, he could have written this poem in standard English, but chooses not to because he is proud of his own identity and proud of how he speaks and where he's come from. And therefore, he uses the spelling and the way you say the poem to overemphasize this. There's repetition, particularly of Dem Tell Me, throughout the poem, and this creates a sense of rhythm. But don't forget, the repetition of Dem Tell Me shows us that he has been brought up being told and being taught about white history, people who are white who have done things rather than black. So it's this repetition of they told me, they told me, they told me, rather than him being allowed to research his own culture, if you like. So this idea of them tell me, it sounds like he's being trapped in this curriculum of white history. End rhyme is heavily used and it's emphasised by adapted sections of nursery rhymes. So The Dish Who Ran Away with the Spoon and Old King Cole, for example. And it's Agard recalling history. It is Agard recalling the nonsensical things he thinks he's being taught. Okay. Imagery is also important throughout the poem. I will be going through the poem stanza by stanza in just a second. In the Dem Tell Me sections, the poet refers to nursery rhyme characters and other non-historical people like Robin Hood or the cow who jumped over the moon. He even mentions 1066 and all that, which might appear to be a historical reference, but is probably him citing like a humorous book, famous for its irreverent parody of histories of England, rather than actually the Battle of Hastings. There's a suggestion that the version of history taught to the poet is not accurate, even before you consider that black people have been completely left out. So actually, Agard uses imagery to mock what he has been taught about white history. The sections on individual black historical figures contain stronger imagery, and this, he's not being humorous and he's not mocking the black history and the black figures. He uses natural metaphors to very powerful effect. He calls that Toussaint l'Ouverture a thorn and a beacon. So it's a very powerful image, is that. Nanny de Maroon is linked with a mountain and fire and rivers. Mary Seacole is described in dramatic imagery as a healing star and a yellow sunrise to the patients she treats. And all three are associated with light, beacon, firewoman and star, suggesting that they play metaphorical roles, illuminating the poet's true historical identity. So there's a contrast between the images he is taught about white history and the images he is taught about black history. So if we look at stanza 1 in a little bit more detail, so the repetition of Dem Tell Me creates a tone of anger. The pronoun dem, remember it's a variation of them, segregates him from white people. Okay, and them is repeated all the way through the poem. So we see that he feels that there's a massive difference between the black people and the white people, him and the white people who are teaching him. He wants to know what they really want to say. What them want to tell me. Bandage up me eye with me own history. Look at that metaphor, bandage up me eye with me own history. Suggests he feels as if the white people are stopping him from knowing about his culture and his race. It's this idea that he feels blinded by what he is taught via nursery rhymes and white history. And then we get another metaphor about sight, blind me to my own identity. So again, it's this idea that they stop him from seeing the history and the culture of black people. Or they try to stop him, because as we hear later on, he does find out. He describes black people who are famous in history, as I mentioned earlier. And we have emotive language related to this. Obviously, the word slave is massively important and actually is very poignant in terms of black history, isn't it? And I think it's an interesting word, is slave, because we are looking at a man who feels trapped by what he's taught, and it's this subtle image of slavery, isn't it? And how he feels it's unjust that he has not been taught about his background, and obviously that would relate to slavery. As I said earlier, he uses really powerful images about the black people. So this natural metaphor of Toussaint de Thorn, the image creates an idea of something powerful and something really strong. And when you contrast that with the nursery rhymes that he's taught, we see that actually what he's being taught in terms of white culture seems nonsense. And so he uses those nursery rhymes to suggest he has been brought up with the history and the traditions of white people rather than the history and traditions of himself. So we hear about the cow that jumped over the moon and the dish runs away with a spoon. And then when you contrast that with the nanny and Mary Seacole, who have done really important things to carve out the identity of black people, then again it does seem very silly what he's being told, what he's being taught. And then, as I said earlier, you've got this reference of Toussaint de Beacon, this image of light. Yeah, and obviously the woman who is associated to a mountain. It's the really powerful, strong images we've got of nature and a comparison to black history. And then obviously what you think there is that it is natural. Of course it's natural. And therefore he should be taught about his own history. Okay. We have emotive language in the words struggle, freedom, hopeful. And once again, it does present the struggle that black people have faced throughout history. The struggle to be free, the struggle to be independent, the struggle to be equal. And actually, Agard presents that through the poem, this struggle of equality, this struggle of him being allowed to find out about himself and about where he's come from and about his background. And again, when we're talking about these famous black historical figures, as I said earlier, you've got these wonderful natural images of the stream and the river and then light. As I said earlier, there's the beacon and then there's the fire, and it's this idea that he's lighting up in terms of finding out about himself. Them tell me about Lord Nelson. The Freedom River as well, guys, is a metaphor, isn't it? And it's the continued fight for freedom. And that links us back to slavery. And that links us back to the word we had earlier, which was slave. Which again is one of the most poignant words within the poem. And again here he references Nelson and Waterloo and Columbus. But actually what he's saying is they haven't told me about the Zulus. They've told me about Waterloo and they've told me about Columbus, white people, but they haven't told me about what the black people were doing at the same time as that, which obviously was, for him, was the Zulu culture. And again, when we're talking about references, powerful references to light and natural images, you've got this idea of the brave healing star. Look at that wonderful, powerful, natural image of a black figure who was a healing star among the wounded, a yellow sunrise to the dying. I mean, there's some powerful images that sums up this really powerful person and this powerful background for the black culture. But then again, we get that horrible repetition from the beginning of they tell me what they want to tell me. So it's as if the curriculum that he's being taught is being very biased, very racist and very selective. And again, as I said earlier, we have this repetition of the pronoun them, which segregates them from me, which is him. And then actually, we have the volta here, guys. Remember, the volta is a change in tone within a poem, okay? And the poem changes at but now. Because the poem changes because there is a clear change through the word but. And he will no longer just be taught about white people and just be taught about nursery rhymes, because he's finding out about his own history. Checking out my own history. Carving out my identity. And we have this personal pronoun I, and it's the ownership of his education. It is the ownership of his identity. It is him standing proud. Look at the metaphor as well to finish the poem. Carving out my own identity, as in he's finding it out himself and he's proud of it. Finally, attitudes, themes and ideas. The tone of the poem obviously is divided into two as well. The Dem Tell Me sections have an accusatory, rebellious tone to them, created by repetition and short lines at the beginning. Again, it shows us that he's angry. Whereas the sections on Toussaint, L'Ouverture, Nanny de Maroon and Mary Seacole are celebratory. Okay, it's a celebration in their tone, and it is emphasised by images of nature and using epic, out-of-the-ordinary vocabulary and words like vision, seafar and star, and these bold images comparing the black people to these wonderful images associated with nature. It is a poem that challenges us to consider the meaning of history, and in that respect it is very powerful. How we come to know about our past and accept our history. The poet might be provoking us to check out our own history, particularly if they include periods or important figures that aren't taught in schools. Okay, I hope this was useful. It is quite a tricky poem, this one, checking out my history. Make sure you go back and pause it and make any notes you need. If you do need any more of my videos, just type Stacey Reay into YouTube. That's Stacey, and Reay is Reay, and good luck in your poetry exam.